All right, let's discuss the Middle East. A live look at the White House on this Wednesday evening, 9:30 in the nation's capital. Nuclear talks between Iran and the United States will take place Friday in the country of Oman. Let's get the latest from Fox's Rebekah Castor. She has all the latest details.
From an Iranian drone flying towards a U.S. warship to gunboats harassing a U.S.-flagged oil tanker in the Strait of Hormuz. Tensions are high ahead of diplomatic talks between the U.S. and Iran on Friday.
These are the types of provocative actions that Iran should avoid, especially as we try to negotiate a resolution to the situation.
Despite those incidents, U.S. Special Envoy Steve Witkoff is in the region and prepared to meet. The Trump administration wants to shut down Iran's nuclear program, limit its ballistic missile development, stop its funding of regional terror groups, and end its deadly crackdown on anti-government protesters.
I'm not sure you can reach a deal with these guys, but we're going to try to find out.
Behind the scenes, the Iranians are making it difficult to even get to Friday's talks. They want to limit discussions to only its nuclear program, which Trump officials say is not going to work.
In order for talks to actually lead to something meaningful, they will have to include certain things.
And if talks go poorly, it could convince President Trump to take more military action.
They had a chance to do something a while ago, and it didn't work out, and we did Midnight Hammer. I don't think they want that happening again.
The U.S. has at least 9 warships, dozens of fighter jets, and between 30,000 to 40,000 troops in the region, leaving President Trump with a number of military options. In Washington, Rebekah Castor, Fox News.
President Trump told NBC today that the Ayatollah should be, quote, worried about the military buildup in the Middle East. Let's bring in Professor Alon Burstein of the Israel-Palestine-Report. Lots to discuss here, Alon. Firstly, why is Trump saying that the Ayatollah should be worried? What's the chief reason?
As always, it's good to see you, Austin. I mean, we have to put this within the framework of the different military options. And that's really, everyone's waiting to see what the United States would do if these talks fail. I mean, today the talks failed and then they were back on track. And we have to remember that a week ago, we didn't have any of these talks scheduled at all. And everyone was assuming when we were in the midst of the protests that were happening in the United States, happening in Iran, everyone was assuming that the United States is going to try to carry out the same type of military operation like they did in Venezuela. What they did in Venezuela, Trump considers a major win. It was a localized military activity, did not commit troops to the ground in Venezuela, and will bring about a change, at least what Trump hopes will bring about a change, in favor of what the United States would like to see in the country. And a lot of people were saying, look, there is the crown prince, so to speak, of Iran, Reza Pahlavi, that a lot of the protesters were asking for his return. And everyone was thinking, is the United States going to try to do the same thing? Is it going to try to just either assassinate or kidnap or arrest the Ayatollah and somehow bring about a quick regime change in Iran without committing a larger military force to the ground? Now, that is much less likely in Iran. That's something we could talk about. It's not going to be the same thing that has happened in Venezuela, and Trump knows this very likely, which is why it hasn't happened yet. But when Trump is saying that the Ayatollah should be worried, I think he's talking specifically about that. Not so much worried about a full-on regional war, but more trying to say he personally should be worried. Remember what happened to the president of Venezuela and where he is today. When I am angry with you, remember what can happen to you as the leader of the country. I think that is more what he was trying to aim for.
Does it seem like Iran is actually willing to negotiate with the United States?
Iran is right now, to some extent, backed against the corner. The regime is very, very weakened by these protests, on the one hand. On the other hand, the protests have, to a large extent, been suppressed. They haven't, a lot of people say using the term died down, but the truth is they were suppressed. The internet was cut, thousands of people were killed, tens of thousands of people arrested, and that is why the protests have now disappeared from the streets. But the regime is nervous, and what it needs, first and foremost, is for the region to calm down and the United States to stop breathing down its neck, because they proved that they are capable of suppressing the protests, at least for now. They may flare up again, obviously, but they proved that they are capable of suppressing the protests. But while they were in the midst of the suppression and in the midst of, sort of wildly killing protesters, all of a sudden the United States started perking up and saying it's going to take military action. So Iran needs the United States to stop breathing down its neck. That has spiraled into talks on the nuclear deal. It's important to remember that this whole military buildup now with Iran had absolutely nothing to do with the nuclear deal, had nothing to do with the ballistic missile program. It all was about the protesters in the United States wanting the protests to overthrow the Iranian regime and saying, don't carry out mass repression against the protesters or else we may intervene militarily. So is Iran willing to negotiate the nuclear deal? I'd say, first of all, Iran needs negotiations to happen. Whether they're willing to actually carry out a deal, sign a deal and carry out, they need negotiations to happen because they need the threat of the United States backing the protesters to disappear. And they know that Trump prefers deals rather than military action. So they'd like negotiations. Would they be willing to actually give up their nuclear program? I would say that from a realpolitik perspective, it probably is something that they should consider in light of the war that happened last year. It's probably something that they should consider with regards to trying to remove the threat. Right, if their nuclear program disappeared, then the United States would probably care a lot less what happens in Iran. That said, the regime thrives and exists on the basis of destiny, promises, religious revival, and it can't also afford to be seen to get such a slap in the face and take away its nuclear program once the supreme leader has said it has to happen. So I do think that Iran desperately wants to get the negotiations. They desperately want the negotiations to happen and they wouldn't mind signing a deal. What will happen later? That I think they care about less. Whether they honor the deal, don't honor the deal, they need the United States to stop breathing down their neck right now, and that's, I think, what they're trying to achieve.
You alluded to this. What don't the Iranians want to discuss at this meeting? The meeting, by the way, just to reiterate, it's going to be on Friday. It's going to be in Oman. The Iranians want this meeting to focus solely on nuclear issues and not other matters. So you mentioned the ballistic missiles. What don't they want to discuss?
So there's four things in total that the United States, and I'll say to some extent Israel, are trying to bring to the table, because Israel and the United States have been discussing this closely. They carried out a lot of joint military activities against Iran during the 12-day war, and Israel is trying to influence the United States to demand certain things. Israel really, really doesn't want Iran to the talks to just focus on the nuclear deal. So what Israel has been pressuring the United States is to focus also on a vast limitation of the ballistic missile program. Ballistic missiles are things you and I have discussed at length, but they're the bulk of Iran's retaliatory or aggressive actions that it can carry out against Israel and against lots of other countries in the region and even all the way to Europe. So Israel and the United States both want severe limitations on the ballistic missile program. They also want to stop any future enrichment program, any future programs of enriching uranium in Iran. They want to kill the nuclear program, essentially. They then want also Iran to stop supporting its proxies in the region, the Hezbollah, Houthis, and also possibly proxies in Iraq. And the United States wants also Iran to pledge that it will not carry out harsh repression against protesters. So really what the United States is bringing to the talks is nuclear deal, ballistic missile program, support funding and support for proxies, and not suppressing protesters. In turn, Iran has said, no, we're only willing to talk about the nuclear program. We're not willing to discuss any of these other things. And that's what led the talks to break down, or the preparing for the talks to break down. It was already today, there was an announcement that the talks are canceled. They're not going to happen because Iran is only willing to discuss the nuclear program. The United States is not going to enter into that. And I will say, while there's been no official commentary, most analysts are suggesting that Iran won that round, because after it was announced that the talks are going to be carried out, what was announced, Iran's foreign minister, Abbas Araghchi, said the nuclear talks are in fact going to take place. And the United States didn't come back with anything else. They didn't say, no, we're talking about everything else. And more than that, Al Jazeera quoted senior US officials confirming the United States has agreed that this round of talks will only be on the nuclear program, and maybe next rounds of talks will be about the other things. So when it comes to the sort of preliminary duking it out about what are we even going to talk about, Iran has said it will only be a nuclear program, and the United States has agreed, at least initially, it's only going to be the nuclear program.
Well, if there's a number of Arab countries that were pretty much lobbying the White House to carry through with this meeting, and that is what Axios reported today. That, and I believe they had it at 9 countries, give or take, had lobbied the White House to, follow through with it, get this thing done, and really be diplomatic and follow through with it. What type of countries would be the countries that do want to see the U.S. and Iran participate in diplomacy?
So there's 2 sets of countries that are really applying pressure on the United States to de-escalate the situation. One is countries that just don't want to see instability in the region. They're either more friendly with Iran, or they just don't want to see another regional war spiraling out. And that would be countries like Syria, countries like, Iraq to some extent, and Turkey. Those are countries that applied pressure on the United States and said, we don't want another regional spiral at this point. You can dial this back. This has been a spiral that didn't have to happen. It started with a protest. Now it's gone to the nuclear issues. Now it's gone to the ballistic missiles. You can dial it back and tone it down. Those are countries that mostly would not be involved if there was this regional spiral, but they prefer not to see war at this point because they're actually right now on the rise in their regional stance. The much larger set, however, and the much more prominent set of countries when it comes to the United States are the countries that are adjacent to the Arab Gulf, Persian Gulf, depends who you ask. Those countries, Saudi Arabia, Qatar, United Arab Emirates, Oman, Bahrain, all of those countries are desperately scared of such an escalation. They're scared of an escalation like that for several reasons. First of all, they are friendly to the United States. That means that they have US bases, they have US troops, especially Qatar, but also Saudi Arabia, also United Arab Emirates, and they would be targets of Iranian retaliation. We saw this already when Iran attacked bases in Qatar. That was, a very small attack, but this could be bigger. But more importantly, all of these countries are placed along the coastline. I had actually printed out a map of Iran in the region, but I didn't manage to put it up yet. But I'm sorry. Hopefully I'll have it next time. I see you already expanded the picture to me. Sorry. So they all Iran sits on the northern parts of the Gulf and the Straits of Hormuz, and all of these countries, again, Saudi Arabia, Qatar, United Arab Emirates, Bahrain, Oman, they're all on the southern part of the Straits. All of their oil and gas exports, essentially all of their economic stability rests on those northern ports that go into the Gulf. And they know that if the Iranian regime feels that it has nothing else to lose, that its back is against the wall, the Iranian regime is probably going to choose a form of scorched earth. It's going to choose a form of attacking the gas production facilities of Qatar, the oil production facilities of Saudi Arabia. And they're going to do this not because they necessarily want to damage those countries, but because they know that one strike against that will shock the world's economy. That's going to be something that upsets Trump and maybe will get Trump to dial back. So all those countries, the Arab countries that are around the Straits of Hormuz and the Gulf, again, Persian or Arab Gulf, all of them are very scared of this escalation. And all of them, I will also say, are very close to Trump. We have Mohammed bin Salman, we have the leaders of Qatar. They've all been building close relationships with Trump over the last year. They have a lot of sway on him, economically and politically. All of them have joined the board of peace that he wants to be building. All of them came to him and said, this is going to be a major shock. Try to get a diplomatic resolution because, and this is again something we can talk about in a minute, you're not going to get the same style quick victory that you had in Venezuela. They're all coming and trying to convince him, this is going to be your Iraq. This is going to be your Afghanistan. You can start something here, but you don't know how it's going to finish. And they're scaring him into continuing this path of diplomacy. I think that's why the United States essentially backed down and is agreeing to only talk about nuclear talks, because the United States also wants to de-escalate the military option, at least at this point, it seems.
I guess my final question for you then would be, what's the best case scenario coming out of Friday?
So all of the initial rumors were saying that what the sides hope to achieve on Friday is simply a declaration that they are committed to diplomacy and to finding a resolution, which is a nice way to say, once again, they want to back down. They want to spiral down from this ongoing escalation now, which is really an escalation of rhetoric. Again, if you think about it, this is the images they were talking about. So that's the Gulf, we're talking about. There's Saudi Arabia, United Arab Emirates, that island that juts out in the middle, that's Qatar. And on the other side is Iran sitting there. So these countries, in the negotiations, the sides have said that they would like to just say, we're going to reach some sort of de-escalation and commit ourselves to negotiations. Negotiations on nuclear deals is something that takes months. The negotiations back in the Obama era took close to 6 months. The previous rounds of talks and negotiations, they ended in explosion and in the 12-day war, but even the negotiations themselves took 2 months. So there's no expectation that the sides are going to sit down and talk on Friday and come up with a resolution that resolves the situation. What there is hope, at least the ones that are favoring diplomacy, the hope is that the sides are going to sit down and say, look, we don't like each other, that much is obvious, but neither one of us would like to see the military escalation right now. Let's commit ourselves to a certain time frame of diplomacy. I will remind you though, when it came to the 12-day war, Trump had given 60 days to the diplomatic track. On day 61, 3 a.m., that is when Israel attacked. So the fact that there was that time given, it was taken seriously then. So if we do have some sort of time frame that is decided upon, they're entering into new rounds of negotiations, I would pay close attention to how long that's supposed to be, because that'll give us some window into what the region may be expecting, at least in the coming weeks or months.
Hopefully we can check in here soon. Professor Alon Burstein is the host of the Israel-Palestine Report. You can find it on social media. Good to see you, Alon. Thank you.
Thank you. Have a good night.